Change. It's a word that can make our stomachs clench. We often talk about people being resistant to change. Sometimes we even label it as laziness or stubbornness. But what if I told you it's much deeper than that? What if this resistance is actually a fundamental part of our human wiring? It's not about a lack of willpower. It's about a very old, very powerful instinct that has kept us alive for millennia. Understanding this is the first step to navigating change with more courage and compassion for ourselves and for others. Think about our earliest ancestors. Their world was full of immediate dangers. A rustle in the bushes could mean a predator. An unfamiliar plant could be poisonous. In that context, the familiar was safe. The known was predictable. Anything new or different carried a potential threat. So our brains developed a powerful bias towards sticking with what worked, with what kept us alive yesterday. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature of our survival mechanism. It's a primal response designed to protect us from harm, a deeply ingrained system that screams caution when faced with the unknown. This survival instinct doesn't just disappear because we live in modern offices instead of open savannas. When a new process is introduced at work or a big life change looms, that same ancient alarm system can get triggered. Our brain doesn't always distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a new software update. It just senses different, and different can feel like danger. So that hesitation, that initial pushback isn't necessarily someone being difficult. It's their internal safety monitor flashing a warning sign, urging them to pause and assess the potential risk. So when we encounter resistance, either in ourselves or in others, let's reframe it. It's not a character defect. It's a sign that our deeply human need for safety and predictability is being challenged. It's an invitation to get curious, not critical. What part of this change feels uncertain? What feels like a potential loss? Acknowledging this biological and psychological underpinning is crucial. It moves us from judgment to understanding, and from frustration to a more empathetic approach to leading and experiencing transformation. It's about recognizing the human in the equation. Our brains are incredible prediction machines. They constantly scan our environment, looking for patterns, creating mental shortcuts, and trying to anticipate what comes next. This is incredibly efficient. It allows us to navigate our daily lives without having to consciously process every single piece of information. Think about driving a familiar route to work. You barely have to think about it, right? Your brain is on autopilot, following established neural pathways. This love for the familiar is all about conserving energy and reducing cognitive load. It's a smart system. Now introduce something new, a new project, a different team structure, a sudden shift in plans. This throws a wrench in the brain's well-oiled prediction machine. Uncertainty floods the system. The brain doesn't have a pre-existing map for this new territory. It has to work harder, process more information, and create new pathways. This requires significant mental effort. And frankly, our brains can be a bit lazy in that regard. Not out of sloth, but out of a desire for efficiency. The unknown feels like heavy lifting for our neural circuits. This is where the comfort zone comes into play. Our comfort zone isn't just a cozy feeling. It's a neurological state where things are predictable and require minimal effort. Stepping outside of it means entering a space of ambiguity. And our brains often interpret ambiguity as a potential threat. It's like walking into a dark room. You move slowly, cautiously, because you don't know what's there. This neurological response to uncertainty is a key reason why we might resist new experiences, even if they could ultimately be beneficial. It's the brain trying to keep us on safe, well-lit paths. So, when we ask people to embrace change, we're essentially asking them to leave their neurological comfort zone. We're asking them to venture into that metaphorical dark room. This isn't a small ask. It demands energy, focus, and a willingness to tolerate discomfort. Understanding this helps us appreciate why just do it isn't always helpful advice. We need to acknowledge the cognitive load that change imposes and find ways to make the unfamiliar feel a little less daunting and a bit more navigable for our pattern-loving brains. Our emotional state is like a thermostat for our willingness to embrace transformation. Think about it. When you feel safe, supported, and valued, you're much more likely to take a risk, try something new, or step into the unknown. Your capacity for vulnerability expands. You feel like you have a soft place to land if things don't go perfectly. In these kinds of environments, curiosity can flourish, and learning from mistakes becomes part of the process, not a catastrophic failure. This emotional safety is paramount. Conversely, if the emotional environment is characterized by fear, blame, or constant pressure, change feels incredibly threatening. When people are worried about being shamed for asking questions or penalized for not getting it right away, their natural response is to retreat. They armor up. They resist, not because they're inherently opposed to the change itself, but because the environment makes the awe of changing feel unsafe. In such climates, vulnerability is a liability, and sticking to the status quo, however imperfect, feels like the only way to stay out of the line of fire. Leadership plays an absolutely critical role in setting this emotional thermostat. Leaders who model vulnerability, who admit their own uncertainties, and who create spaces where it's okay to stumble and learn, foster a culture where change is more readily accepted. They understand that transformation is a human process, messy and imperfect. They prioritize psychological safety, ensuring that team members feel seen, heard, and respected, even amidst upheaval. This kind of leadership doesn't just manage change, it cultivates an environment where people can dare to change. Therefore, when we talk about driving transformation, we must look beyond the spreadsheets and timelines. We need to assess the emotional landscape. Are we asking people to be brave in an environment that punishes bravery? Are we expecting innovation in a culture that stifles questions? If we want people to lean into the discomfort of change, we must first create an emotional container that feels secure enough to hold that discomfort. It's about building trust, fostering connection, and leading with empathy, making the journey of change a shared, supported experience. So, knowing that resistance to change is a natural human response, tied to our survival instincts and our brain's love for certainty, how do we actually move through it? How do we encourage ourselves and others to step into transformation rather than shutting down? The answer lies in making change feel safer, more understandable, and more meaningful. It's about acknowledging the human element at every step. We can't just bulldoze through resistance. We need to build bridges over it with compassion and clarity. First, let's talk about safety. Uncertainty is a huge driver of resistance. We can reduce this by communicating clearly and consistently. Explain the why behind the change. What problem are we trying to solve? What are the expected benefits? Be honest about the unknowns too. Transparency builds trust, and trust is the bedrock of psychological safety. Break down big changes into smaller, more manageable steps. This makes the unknown feel less overwhelming and allows for small wins along the way, which builds momentum and confidence. Next, connect the change to something meaningful. Our brains might resist the effort of newness, but our hearts can be swayed by purpose. How does this transformation align with our values, our team's mission, or a larger vision that people care about? When change is linked to a compelling why that resonates on an emotional level, people are more likely to find the courage and motivation to engage. It's not just about doing something different. It's about contributing to something important. This sense of purpose can be a powerful antidote to fear. Finally, remember that transformation is a journey, not an event. There will be bumps, there will be learning curves. Practice self-compassion and extend that compassion to others. Acknowledge the effort and courage it takes to adapt. Create space for feedback, for questions, and even for expressing concerns without judgment. When we approach change with an understanding of the human experience, our need for safety, our response to uncertainty, and our desire for meaning, we can navigate it more effectively. It's about daring to lead with our whole hearts, fostering environments where everyone feels empowered to step into the new. I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to subscribe and share. Also, check out our articles on LinkedIn and the podcast on Spotify. Thanks for watching. See you next time.